Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Cool. Welcome to the event, Fitting the Pieces Together, Local Government and Cannabis Business. I appreciate you all joining. Looks like we've got about 70 participants and even more than that in terms of sign-up. So very excited to do this first event. Hopefully it's the first of many. We as an industry association are here to help any way that we can facilitate a strong start to the industry here, and partnership with local government officials is critical. So we'll dive right in. We've got quite a bit to cover here. So let's just jump right into the agenda. So introductions, we've got, my name is Ned Horsted. I'm the Executive Director of the Cannabis Industry Association of South Dakota. We were founded in January of last year prior to legislative session, and since then we've been very involved both at the state and local level on all things cannabis related. So joining me today is Melissa Mentley, Executive Director of New Approach South Dakota, and also the Director of Compliance for Native Nations Cannabis. Melissa was the individual that wrote I Am 26. We have Matthew Jorgensen, who's got, well, prior to being CEO of Cannabis Chem Lab, he was a former law enforcement officer, about 20 years in law enforcement across 3 different states, Washington, Colorado, and South Dakota. We've got Kitrick Jeffries, Director of Compliance for Dakota Cannabis Consulting, and one that I missed, Liz Tiger, who's a consultant for 605 Cannabis here in the state. Just stepping through the agenda, we're going to have Melissa talk a little bit about local control and what's in the law. Many of you know this, so we wanted to touch on it. It's clear that through talking to, we've got 66 counties and many more municipalities, so not everyone has had the time or energy or wants to really dig into the law and all that, so we'll touch on that real briefly. I will talk a little bit about a local perspective. Unfortunately, we had a mayor, former mayor of a municipality in Colorado that unfortunately couldn't join us today, but he was kind enough to share some quotes. So I'll kind of step through. And this is based on the questions that you all asked. We had some frequently asked questions, so I sent them his way and he got back to us with some of those. We'll have Matt talk about public health, safety, and security. Kit's going to talk a little bit about adult use. Tomorrow we might see a Supreme Court decision, any given Thursday, I say, we might see a Supreme Court decision. So we want to make sure that should it be upheld, that folks are prepared for that. Then we'll have Liz Tiger talk a little bit about the application process. There's a little bit of a chicken and egg situation here that many of you have picked up on, and she's just going to kind of talk through what we've seen in some different municipalities and working with the Department of Health. So, and then after that, we'll just open it up to a Q&A. I want to be respectful of everyone's time, try to wrap this up in an hour. However, if there is availability for longer than that and questions are still going, we're happy to keep moving for a bit there. So with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Mentley, talk a little bit about local control. Melissa, you're up.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. So we're going to talk a little bit about local control, which anybody that's going through the licensing process or has started or looked at doing it is noticing that these regulations from county to county, city to city change. And that was due to, in I'm 26, we put in local control. It was basically a limited amount of control that each town or county would have to ensure that they felt that they were really part of the process. And so we did put in some stipulations that we do allow them to limit the number of dispensaries that they do have, but they're not allowed to ban them. We have noticed that a lot of counties are making sure that they are taking out every other business license outside of testing and dispensaries. So it's looking like South Dakota is going to have a whole bunch of dispensaries and not any cultivation or production. One of the nice things is that the chicken and the egg does come into play in 3420G. So the department does have to solicit and consider input from the local government in preference for licenses. I think we're going to start seeing this in a couple different areas due to the number of licenses being greater than the ones available. And so when we go to the state side, there's going to be some conflict there. So as IM26 does start to develop and play out, it's going to be very, very interesting. So local government does get to put in place ordinances governing medical marijuana establishments. And so they can't be in conflict with the bill, which is really important. The voters did bring IM 26 to success in the state. And so we want to really respect what was done there. And so I'm going to switch the slide, guys. Apparently I was messing them up and switching it on them without telling them. So local government, the prohibition of dispensaries is not permitted. They are limiting them though. We have 5 coming out in Sioux Falls tomorrow. There's 5 up for grabs in Mitchell right now. It's interesting. The fees for those range, like it shows Lake Andes is $500. Well, we have Meade County, which is $125,000. Sioux Falls did break it up into an application fee and a licensing fee, but still, just to apply, that was $75,000. So the reasonable fee, I think is an interesting way that it's interesting to see how people consider what a reasonable fee is, because a reasonable fee for the cannabis industry on the medical side is in that 5,000 range, 125,000, not so much. And then we do have 4 types of licenses. We do have cultivation, product manufacturing, testing, and dispensary. And I'm going to turn it over to Ned to talk about those.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks, Melissa. Yeah, so just another real high-level thing for those aware and those that are not. There are 4 licensing types under IM 26 3420G. That's cultivation, which means the agricultural piece of it, actually growing the plant. This happens under state rule. It can happen in greenhouses. It can happen in closed, warehouse-style buildings with grow lights. It can even happen with heavy security, 6-foot tall fences in an outdoor area, should people want to have that flexibility to do it. Product manufacturing, I'll get into this a little bit, but a lot of times people are just thinking about hazardous chemicals, the extraction process of the cannabis plant. That license type can actually use a little bit differently, so I'll get into that in the next slide here. There's testing. So testing, contrary to what I've met with a few local officials, just thought maybe it's sitting around the table and individuals testing cannabis. That's not actually how it works. It's analytical testing, making sure that people aren't consuming mold, heavy metals. They know their potency of the product, different cannabinoids that are in the plant, all of that. Matt will get into that a little bit here shortly. And then the 4th licensing type is retail dispensaries, of course. So and you'll see in Amendment A and a lot of other programs that you've seen stood up, it kind of mirrors what you see there. There's usually kind of those 4. Sometimes they add a distribution piece, but that's what we're dealing with right now. So reason I wanted to touch on this is we're seeing a number of different local governments just, they know that they have to, by law, allow dispensaries. However, they, don't just decide that they're going to ban absolutely everything else. I was hoping that this would be a little bit helpful to describe what's going on here. So you can see multiple different ways how this works. The interesting thing about testing in particular is it is required for each step of the process. So you could have someone that does cultivation and then sell the flower or the buds directly to a dispensary. Before that happens, it needs to be tested. So likewise, you could go from a cultivation facility to a product manufacturing facility where they make it into oil or something like that. It would need to be tested first before they make it into oil, tested again after it's made into a product, and then it would go to retail for the shelves. And then kind of what I was alluding to earlier on product manufacturing, and why you maybe do not want to ban it for entrepreneurs in your area, or at least something to consider. You can go from cultivation, it would get tested. Then it goes to an extraction lab, and that I should have put on the slide, but it breaks down further. So extraction can happen a couple of different ways. There is extraction using volatile chemicals or hazardous chemicals, and then there is extraction, or there are extraction methods that are more like, think about it like squeezing an orange. You want citric acid or orange juice or whatever. You can get it 2 different ways. You can squeeze an orange, or I'm sure you could drop it in chemicals and send it through a process and probably extract more of it that way, but it'd be a little bit more dangerous. So there are ways to do this that aren't really all that dangerous. And then that would require a product manufacturing license. Product development also requires that. So what you could have is a business that just extracts the cannabis oil, and then you would have another business. Maybe I remember not long after the election, I had a few folks from Sioux Falls reach out to me saying, I'm really interested in getting in and making cupcakes or brownies or gummies, some sort of edible. They could actually do that, much like you see, there's like a place called Intoxibate here in Sioux Falls, where you're just taking the oil. So you're buying that from a product manufacturer licensed facility, and you have a product manufacturing license, and you're just combining that ingredient with, the ingredients to make brownies or whatever. So both of those would fall under product manufacturing, and it's tested again after you make the product, and then it moves on to retail. So hopefully that all makes sense. Now, a little bit from Chris Teagarden. Chris was the is the former mayor of Edgewater, Colorado. For reference, it's a municipality in the Denver metro, about 5,000 population. So, you might be able to draw a parallel to some of the suburbs around Sioux Falls or Rapid City. But a lot of the questions that came in our sign-up form were similar. So I passed the most frequent ones along to Chris, and he got me some responses. So we'll dive right in. I asked, what was the biggest impact from legalization? Chris said the obvious impact was the tax revenue, as our city of Edgewater, Colorado was able to speed up the process of updating an entire infrastructure overhaul. We did not roll adult use cannabis taxes into the general fund, instead using the revenue for fixed assets. We basically paved our entire streets along with curb cuts from 1 year of taxes. After the infrastructure was complete, we utilized the taxes to fund a brand new civic center, complete with a gym and fitness center, city hall, police station, and district library. Those upgrades were sorely needed, as existing city properties were then able to be sold to the private sector. Edgewater collects no money from property taxes, and the entire budget is from sales tax. So the planning and execution, with the help of cannabis taxes, position the city for future success. Probably our most frequent question was, or concern was, I'm concerned about the increase of crime. And at the end here, there are some resources from the Cato Institute and others that show, actual research behind whether or not there is a large increase in crime. This is how Chris sort of covered that question for us. In 3 years, there were 3 crimes committed directly related to dispensaries themselves, but the data did not support an increase in crime directly related to the sale and or use of cannabis in the city. Our DRE officials in the entire department made contact with subjects for different reasons, and cannabis could have been an accompaniment, but rarely was a main factor for police contact. In summation, we saw no measurable uptick in crime due to cannabis. We partnered with the sheriff's office twice a year to do a drug sweep in the high school. A lot of questions, by the way, sidebar, a lot of questions on youth use as well, and whether or not there's an increase there. Chris said in 3 years, I believe they found 1 edible. I'm sure youth did get their hands on product, much like youth acquire alcohol, but there was no pronounced increase in use. I would, however, take a look at the state of Colorado's data regarding youth cannabis use, as we did not collect comprehensive data within the city for youth offenses. One common theme that I've heard from some folks in the state that, tend to not agree with IM26 or MMNA is this Rocky Mountain high intensity drug trafficking study that was done, which did show an increased use in cannabis use. I believe it was 2013 and 2014. However, every year since then, it's trended downward. So it was one little spike there. I just want to encourage people to get information from many sources, because they don't share the rest of the story typically when they're talking about that one. Questions on cost to taxpayers, which I, as a taxpayer, can certainly appreciate. Chris said that cannabis in our community didn't cost the taxpayers a dime. The city did not create extrajudicial or administrative entities or authorities that would cost taxpayer money for further oversight. I suppose the chief of police and myself taking time to visit facilities from time to time, and the few crimes directly related to cannabis were the only taxpayer burdens. Law enforcement were supportive of the experiment, and as I said before, most contacts were not due to cannabis being the main factor. And then just a few additional thoughts. Chris said that the success of cannabis in the community far outpaced any negative scenarios the city planned for in the event such negative occurrences did arise. It never happened. He said, I would not put a cap on the licenses and just let zoning do the work. You can do this through setbacks. So if you have a certain amount of feet between establishments, we've seen many municipalities do that. Back to the quote, we were a bit hesitant to oversaturate the market for such a small city. And it was, after all, a new experiment. We used the basic framework for medical regulations that allowed all, so I didn't share, Chris was the mayor as adult use legalization was happening in Colorado. I believe the first one to pass an ordinance regarding recreational marijuana. So this is after it passed and they're in the implementation period. I believe that was like 2015 to 2017 timeframe. Anyway, they used the basic framework and allowed all existing medical establishments to apply for recreational within the city. State regulations really dictated what those businesses had to do to convert or add a recreational license. We basically treated the cannabis industry like any other legal business and did not impose extra red tape. In the end, I always encourage an inverted taxation structure for the industry. I believe that state overtaxes and should regulate most of the taxation to cover administrative and enforcement measures. In that way, this allows local government to set the taxation policy in a more local free market environment. And that's it on that. So I'll kick it over to Matt Jorgensen.
Well, I've got a really easy job. Ned did most of it for me, so that was awesome, explaining away testing and some of that kind of concerns. But the reason I was brought into this conversation was as a forensic scientist, which is what I did for almost 20 years, I analyzed a significant amount of marijuana in Washington and Colorado and here in South Dakota. You know, of the 4,000 cases that I did and 9,000 items that I did of forensic science work, a pretty good chunk of it was marijuana. And to think of not wasting that kind of time on something like marijuana and being able to apply my my talent, my resources, and law enforcement talent and law enforcement resources for that way, or for that matter, to more violent crimes, to more appropriate resources, that appeals to me in a great way. And I'm hoping that as government officials, it appeals to you as well. We were talking about crime rates from a public safety, public health standpoint. You know, that Cato study that we said, yes, there were a couple of spikes, but overall, there has not been any increase in crime rate. No more so than it was prior to legalization of marijuana. And it's kind of one of the takeaways that I want you to really appreciate from that Cato study is things like crime rate, things like the rate of increase in use. Those percentages, those rates were on an uptick before legalization was ever even contemplated. And they're on the same uptick that they were prior to. So none of this stuff is going to be blamed on the legalization of marijuana. Underground versus legitimate. That's one of the other things that I really want to try to really emphasize is one of the things that the Cato study did show was that there is a significant takeaway, a divergence from the underground market. Having legitimate retail is definitely hurting the pocketbook of those that would do it for nefarious reasons. And, you know, at the end, that's what we want. We want the cartels out of this business. We want the unsavory actors out of this business. We want it legitimate. This is a very good thing. To speak also on that matter, you know, from safety of the industry standpoint, underground versus legitimate products. You know, as one of the things that I did as a forensic scientist, we were working on, you know, both the Chinese mafias as well as some of the cartels bringing in synthetics. Synthetic cannabinoids were sprayed on things like catnip and sold as K2 or spice back in the early 2010s. And that is something that really is impactful, that we get those underground and those black market types of things out of there, that we have legitimate products that are tested. Ned brought up the certificates of analysis, those testing, those should have teeth. If there's going to be any takeaway from local governments as well as state, I'd like to pause and just say that the Department of Health did a very good job of going over what they're looking for, what they want to not have in products, things like pesticides and the different myotoxins and heavy metals. Those are things that they did contemplate. They do want not in the market. So we have the capability of testing for those things. And I encourage all of the local municipalities to really focus on that testing end of things. If you want a legitimate industry, having things tested, having things above board is a huge part of that. And to that end, growers and manufacturers alike are pushing for it. They want to be legitimate. They want to have that certificate of analysis be a valid shield as well as a sword, saying, look, our stuff is legitimate, our product is safe. This is something that the industry is really pushing for. And I highly encourage the local governments to do the same thing, to get on board and really push for that certificate of analysis to be a valid thing. Lastly, I kind of wanted to just touch on security. There were some big concerns. Again, dive into the Department of Health's rules. They really did a great job with both, talking about safety plans, talking about dealing with explosion or fire hazards in areas where there might be solvents involved, or dealing with pesticides, herbicides, things like that, whether that be safety, the security of the facilities themselves, having the cameras, having video footage, having safety plans. All those things are definitely in place. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. I would look to the state for answers on those types of things when you copy and paste your rules and regulations. But just one note I really wanted to put in fact, I actually just even wrote it out. It was that important to distinguish the difference between a public record and confidential records. These different grows, these different manufacturing places, they have no problem giving you what their safety plan is, giving you what their security plan is, but it's done so on the understanding that that's confidential records. If you make those public records, all you're doing is giving the nefarious players the playbook on how to steal it or how to rob them. And that's something we just quite necessarily do not want. So I do caution you to understand the nuances of some of these things that they're wanting to provide you. They want to be transparent as they can be, but be transparent in a way that's still safe to everybody, to include the public. Thanks, Ned.
All right, thanks, Matt. We'll kick it over to Kittrick. Kit, I'm controlling the slides, so just tell me next, and I'll jump in with you.
Why do I always have to go right after a bunch of good speakers? Jeez Louise, that makes it tough, Well, appreciate you guys having me today. My name is Kit Jeffries. I represent Dakota Cannabis Consulting here in Rapid City. I want to start off by saying thank you to all the municipalities who put in this good faith effort into creating good policy. I want to say thank you to the Department of Health for all their hard work, and just really give yourselves a pat on the back. It's been a long road. We're about halfway there. We just got to keep trucking. The next portion of what we're going to be talking about, what my presentation is going to be today, is about the transition from medical marijuana to adult use marijuana. And I'll be presenting some findings from a study done by the Drug Enforcement and Policy Center at the Ohio State University Moritz College of Law. And it was titled From Medical to Recreational Marijuana, Lessons from States in Transition. And I have an in-depth report that I'll have dropped in the chat for those of you that like to learn visually. You can click on the link and view the report and read it for yourself. I'll be sharing a couple of excerpts from the report today to share some light on what we can anticipate moving forward. And this whole implementation process, this whole process of medical marijuana has been hard because South Dakota has given local control to government for everyone, but yet no one really got a blueprint to follow. It was mainly following the footsteps of other states. And this has been a little problematic for industry, municipal and county governments, as well as the state, but it also has its perks. Municipalities have the opportunity to decide what happens within their jurisdictions, and that's a positive thing, in my opinion. And I'd like to share a story with you of what was required in Oregon in the medical marijuana program. I was an owner of the business. It was a cultivation facility with a couple of my good friends from South Dakota. We partnered up and moved out to Oregon to get this medical marijuana cultivation facility going. And although the municipal regulation was very minimal, the state required a 2-inch thick metal door on all indoor cultivation facilities. No fence was required within the early draft of the rules. However, we were cultivating in a 20 by 96 foot polyplastic greenhouse, yet we were required to have had to have a 2-inch thick metal door. Now, it would have taken a couple hours to pick that lock on that metal door, but anyone with a butter knife could have cut through the plastic on the greenhouse. And that was because Oregon didn't have the opportunity to learn from other states as they were establishing their programs, as much of you guys have had the opportunity to learn from other states. But within that study from the Ohio State University, some of the lessons of success, and there's 6 lessons of success that they go on to talk about. One of them is cultivate ongoing stakeholder engagement, kind of what we're doing right now, talking to stakeholders, seeing what's working, seeing what's not. Ensure interagency coordination, talking to the Department of Health and the county, working together. Align adult use regulations with medical marijuana programs and applicable federal rules. And a little bit about that, today, all states that have legalized adult use marijuana have done so after already having a medical marijuana program in place. And according to several interviewees within the study, creating a medical marijuana program with an eye toward eventual adult use legalization or existing regulations for medical marijuana and using those medical marijuana regulations as a template for the adult use program can make the future transition easier to manage. So when you guys are writing these ordinances, definitely keep that in mind. Always plan for more than you think you need. Provide support to local governments. And part of the thing that they talked about was the last one, the 6th one, was start strict and loosen up later. And when they talked about that, what they meant by that was in regards to regulations surrounding edibles and testing and things like that, not necessarily capping licenses and then like the hours of the day that they can be operational. Because when you start out with a cap, like you did with liquor licenses, that stakeholder will put in time, effort, and energy into starting the business. And when you come back in and arbitrarily issue more licenses, it takes away from that hard work that established the value of that license. There were also several challenges that the interviewees had while going through this, which was social equity and revenue allocation, illicit market and organized crime, as Matt had touched about earlier, overconsumption, and managing home grow. Now, I believe that the municipalities have an opportunity to talk to their legislatures about that revenue allocation portion within some of the challenges and how those municipalities and counties can benefit from the taxes that come from the cannabis industry. And with the and same with home grow, I think the legislators are going to make those decisions regarding home grow. It's been talked about a lot during the recreational and medical summer studies. But with overconsumption, the study had found that there was no nationwide data on medical marijuana users, but studies in individual states indicated that the average age is over 40, as people are more likely to suffer from a qualifying condition from medical, or that would need medical marijuana. And so where they have it with states with medical and recreational, typically they have more opportunity to purchase larger quantities. Say like Oregon, I think it was 1.5 pounds was what you were able to purchase within your window. In South Dakota, that's 3 ounces. So it's a drastic change. And we had learned from that and changed that so that they have an opportunity to purchase 3 ounces of flower within that time period. And as we kind of go through, there was also some decision points when deciding what policy. There are pros and cons to each side, but I definitely encourage everybody to go read through that study that was done by the Ohio State University. But some of the things that they talked about was passing reform through the ballot initiative versus the legislature, centralization of regulatory powers. We're kind of going through that now, and how Amendment A had the Department of Revenue spearhead the recreational program and the Department of Health spearhead the medical program. Another piece was allowing vertical integration, imposing limits on the number of licenses, preferential treatment to establish medical licensees, and residency requirements for licensees as well. So a couple points on those decision points I just wanted to talk about. So they have pros and cons. I'm going to read you the pros and the cons for imposing limits on the number of licenses. A pro for caps would be the ability to charge higher licensing fees to support effective regulatory structure. Generally, only well-capitalized businesses can enter the market due to high fees. I'm gonna read that one again. Generally, only well-capitalized businesses can enter the market due to high licensing fees. I'm a blue-collar person myself. I think if a blue-collar person can come in and meet all of the requirements of the bureaucracy that's set forward within the cannabis industry, they deserve every right as a corporate cannabis conglomerate to come in and at least have an attempt at growing cannabis or having a retail operation. Some of the other pros that they had said in this was the ability to regulate the supply of product, and then allows the preferential treatment of certain classes of applicants. Now, the cons, which is imposing the limits on the number of licenses, would be limits how many entities can enter the industry. And it gives advantages to those well-capitalized individuals or businesses, and it limits the diversity in the industry. By restricting supply, it creates potential for higher prices to consumers. Higher prices at the store means that they're probably going to go to the Kmart parking lot to go purchase their black market marijuana. It necessitates creation of government selection process, which can create controversy. And kind of in closing, all states that have had legalized adult use marijuana have done so after already having a medical marijuana program in place. According to several of the interviewees, creating a medical marijuana program with an eye toward eventual adult use legalization can make any future transition faster and easier to manage. And as stated by a Mr. Bisbo, when we implemented the medical program, we did that always with the thought ahead, understanding that at some point, recreational legalization was going to become a reality. We built the program so that it could expand and incorporate additional functions as best as we could predict at the time. If a state already has an existing regulations for medical marijuana, developing the adult use program using similar laws and structures can ease the transition. As Mr. Jim Burak, the director of the Marijuana Enforcement Division at the Colorado Department of Revenue, put it, if you look at the statutes that set up medical and adult use retail, you will see that they are nearly identical. The language is borrowed straight across. And then, not surprisingly, the language and rules and regulations on both the medical and retail side is largely harmonious. And we spent a lot of time creating that harmonization. States should consider using similar statutory structures and terms when making the transition, because it provides businesses and government officials with a familiar and understandable regulatory framework. And I'm all good, Ned. I appreciate your guys' time.
Right on. Thanks, Kit.
Oh, I guess you could go to the next slide, I suppose. That's the only difference in medical and recreational. I just wanted to put that picture on there. Blue and yellow tags from a metric seed to sale tracking system. Other than that, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. It's the exact same thing. It's the quantity that's the difference, changing medical to recreational and ordinance, and changing patient to adult use 21 plus.
Yeah, I would just add that Slight differences, right? Like we went through the adult use, or excuse me, the summer study committee out of the legislature, and they were talking about one of the proposals that came out before the last meeting was to just scrap medical entirely for people 21 plus, and a few changes there. You know, you're taxing patients if you do that. Like there are reasons that it's problematic. A big part of it being that you all and we all in the Department of Health have spent an insane amount of time over the last year here getting this program set up. So yeah, that's one point of clarification that I would make on that. Liz, you're up.
All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today and for sitting through our presentation. I know we do this a lot, and so we get really used to this information, and it's easy to forget that not all of the information gets out where it needs to go. So I really appreciate everybody taking the time to join us today on this. For my last little piece on the presentation, I'm just going to talk about the local government compliance certification that the state needs. One question that I have heard a lot from municipalities and counties across the state is, well, what does the state need from us? Specifically, the state is going to need you to fill out this Form E and submit it to them for every application that comes through. This will be true whether you have an ordinance or not, because you have to verify that either A, the applicant did in fact meet all of the local requirements, or that they didn't. And the other side of that would be to say that we don't have any local requirements, you don't need anything from us. A couple of things to know with this is that there are timelines in play, as we all found out rather abruptly, right, just a few weeks ago. In areas that have caps on your licensing, the state is giving you 90 days from the time that your ordinance is active until the time where the application window closes at their level. What does that mean for your Form E and for processing the applications in your own offices? Basically, you have to be mindful of that time frame when you are building your ordinance and putting in those requirements, and then with getting those forms back to the state. You can see here, I just took this information from the state's website, medcannabis.sd.gov, which is a pretty good resource to go check out for yourselves. You can see some of the forms and the different rules and parts of law that speak specifically to this. It really, I guess that really is about it for this. It's a small piece, probably thankfully for everybody, right?
Right on. All right. New to the Zoom webinar feature. So here are some resources, and we'll open it up to questions, actually. We can take some live if you would like. You can drop them into the chat as well. But yeah, if you want to raise your hand using the Zoom function, go ahead and do that. I'm hoping we caught a lot of the high-level questions that you all had, but I'm sure there are many more. So let's see, I might need to stop sharing the screen here. Oh, I did want to point out on resources here. I found myself very frequently finding where the law was online at the South Dakota Legislature's website, as well as the state rules. So I made just real quick links, /law and /rules to the CIASD website. So you need a quick reference. Those are pretty easy to remember. Pamela asks, Form E is for medical or recreational marijuana? Kid or Liz?
Medical.
Well, right now, Form E is just for medical marijuana because we don't have an active recreational program at this point. Will they take that form and use it for recreational? It seems reasonable.
Absolutely. Will we be able to go back and see this webinar or share it with our entities? Yeah, I believe I'm recording this, so I can send a link around for folks to run with it if they want. Greg Neitzer, hi Greg, thanks for joining us. How do you realistically think or how soon do you realistically think we will see the first stores selling in the state, given the entire supply chain has to get established? Yeah, I think reasonable minds can come up with a couple different answers here. I would say, and Kit might know better because he's been in other states to see this happen, maybe June-ish. What do you think?
Yeah, so like you have to look at it from the perspective of the licenses are going to be issued by the Department of Health via lottery, right? So let's just use Rapid City as an example. It's where I'm my call home base, right? And so Rapid City application window closes December 31st, and the department will issue a lottery some point in the near future after that. Let's just say it's February 1st to make it easy. Well, if a stakeholder isn't already building out their cultivation facilities, because we're talking seed to sale, then if that stakeholder gets that license on February 1st with no build out, they have to take about 90 to 120 days to build out that facility, right? Then it takes about another 130 days to grow that plant from seed to get ready for sale. So realistically, you're midsummer until we would see that. Now, if they have it already ready to go and that facility's built, done, ready to rock, February 1, they get plants in the ground. It'd be 130 days after that, and you'd have a dispensary ready to go.
There you have it. A lot of questions. If you can use the Q&A part of Zoom, it might just keep things a little bit cleaner, and I can go through them. But I'll step through what we've got in the chat here, and appreciate the involvement that we've had. Let's see. Yes, several questions on whether or not we can share the slideshow or a link to replay. We'll do that. Is Form E available on the Department of Health website? I haven't checked lately. Liz?
It is. Yes.
Cool. Do you think we will see anything from courts this week? Amber, thank you for the question. I get asked this probably every day, and I say we'll have, recreational adult use cannabis will come to South Dakota sometime between this Thursday and 3 years from now. Like, we really don't know when the court will make its decision, and I say that half jokingly, but there are basically three paths here. We could have Amendment A upheld. If they don't throw out the entire thing, there's some middle ground there. So they could say it's now legal in the state constitution. Marijuana is legal in the state constitution. However, it was a step too far to have a 15% tax and say that it's the Department of Revenue that governs it and all of that. So there's maybe some middle ground. Anyway, may see one soon. We have no way to know. I think there are about 5 South Dakotans that know for sure when that might happen, and they all happen to be Supreme Court justices. So the other two paths here are legislatively, and some of the local officials might love this. I mean, I'm talking to some of the folks in the legislature about an adult use bill that would send back some tax dollars directly to local governments, and I think that'd be a popular deal. And then, of course, the campaign folks over at South Dakotans for Better Marijuana Laws are working very hard to get this on the ballot again for 2022. So there's sort of the three paths. Sean asks, is there a link for state ordinances regarding medical cannabis, or is it the only thing that's up the South Dakota codified laws?
Steve,
yeah, I think I know what you're asking. So go to and I'll just give you the short link here. I think I'm still screen sharing it. Take a read through rules. I think that's what you mean. It's South Dakota Administrative Rules 4490 that govern medical cannabis. And you can get there real quick through CIASD.com/rules. And if I didn't answer your question, feel free to drop something else in. Oh, Stephen Hauser got that. Thank you, Stephen. Would the city ordinance process start again if adult goes through? Great question, Carol. It depends. Most cities and counties that I have seen have specifically called this out as a medical cannabis ordinance. However, if they take the word, if medical is not in it, it could also be a rec one. I think the idea is everyone would probably do this again for rec. That's part of the reason that we wanted to make sure that you had access to that Ohio State study from the Drug Enforcement and Policy Center over there. And just because, I think that I know there's been a lot of hard work from you all in putting together ordinances at the local level. And, part of the reason I want to add this call is there are still a lot of cities and counties that most of them have passed something by now. Some of them are still operating on a temporary one. Some of them are in the 20-day wait window before passing something before it actually goes into effect. But a point that I wanted to call out here is, cultivation in particular, for many of the localities that are banning cultivation entirely, or product manufacturing, or testing for that matter. I think cultivation in particular, it's a significant capital investment. So you're looking at probably couple $1 million minimum for some of these large grow facilities, and they're not moving once they're up. So, if you're interested in the tax revenue and some of the things that come along to it, I believe that the medical facilities will probably ultimately turn into, like Kit showed, the blue tag and the red tag, whether it's rec or med. So hopefully that helps.
And Ned, can I touch on something?
Yeah, go ahead.
So with the cultivation, I do want to express this for anybody that's going through medical and recreational. And I like to think that I think always outside of the box in the 5-10 year plan, right? And with recreational cannabis coming online, right now, we cannot have interstate commerce. It's a federal prohibition. However, Chuck Schumer, Cory Booker, and Ron Wyden are looking to unlock that interstate commerce portion of it. South Dakota is positioned and can position itself to be the West Virginia of the tobacco industry. Well, I mean, we have 10 crops that we're top 5 producers in the United States, and outdoor cultivation is absolutely crucial to several key components of that. It helps keeps costs down. It helps. I'm just gonna leave it at that. We could just go on and on about it, but I'm just explaining that agricultural zoning is very good for cannabis cultivation, and allowing outdoor cultivation is very good as well.
I do want to touch on something with this also. Ned, is that okay?
Melissa. Yeah, throw on your camera if you can.
No. Actually, I'm not gonna. I do want to say this for any of the cities and counties that are looking to ban cultivation. One of the things, many of you know that I do work as the Director of Compliance for Native Nations, and we do have a facility up here in Flandreau. We actually have a campus. I like to tell people we're hidden in plain sight. You could drive past our building every day for 5 years and never know it's here. We don't have any smell. There's nothing outdoors that tells what we are. We just look like a normal Morton building. And so for any community that is nervous about bringing cultivation in, I do encourage you to contact us and maybe come take a look at our campus. We'd love to show the city officials around and show you that this isn't something to be scared of. And most people drive past us 3 or 4 times before they actually find us to come for a tour. So that door is always open.
Thanks, Melissa. Yeah, and I should take a minute to just thank Yvonne Taylor with the Municipal League and Chris Jacobson for getting this information out to folks. I'd mentioned Yvonne, and Chris actually had toured Flandreau with Melissa and I a few months ago. So I put that invite out to Yvonne and the association, but my plan was to kind of set up a time to do it. So if there are folks that are interested in checking out what this is all about, with a real full vertically integrated system that's already live in the state, it might help you at least see what the industry looks like in full operation. So we had a question on adding contact info to the slides or something like that. So before I email out the slides and everything to our attendees, I'll throw some of that on there, and then hopefully you can get in touch with the tribe up in Flandreau and do that if it's something you're interested in doing. All right, next question is from Jeremy Russell. What is the licensing procedure for testing, manufacturing, and cultivation? And can you provide a good example of another municipality that has this in place? Yeah, Kit, go ahead.
So the licensing procedure, it really depended on where you're at, Jeremy. So everybody's different all across the state. I like to think of South Dakota, and the way it's structured with local control is that Sioux Falls might have pulled direction from North Dakota. Lincoln County might have pulled direction from Oklahoma with a little bit more expensive license fees. Rapid City took more of like a Colorado approach. Pennington County was like Adams County, Colorado. Everyone's got different structures and different pieces that they pulled into their own ordinances to make it work with what they thought fit best. So it really depends on what jurisdiction you're in as far as the city goes or county goes. As far as the state goes, I'm a cannabis nerd, and I counted 827 different requirements that blanket all different license types. And so within those, you know, there may be 100 of them that don't really necessarily coordinate to cultivation. There may be 100 of them that don't necessarily coordinate to testing. So it's a very broad question, but for the most part, the best advice is to study whatever city or municipality you're in and study what the state has. I mean, that's basically it. Yeah.
Cool. All right. I think we're down to, let's just pull that down to get a little bit of a different view here. I missed a question. Carol asked, is there the possibility of the state setting rules similar to liquor, that towns could be more restrictive if we choose to? I may need a little bit of clarification on that question, just that, I mean, there's a decent amount of local control, as we've seen. Some local governments are choosing to ban 3 out of 4 license types, you know, charging different fees, all of that. Yeah, I guess I just need to know a little bit more from you, Carol, on what exactly you're asking there. And I think that's about all we have for questions. So, I mean, keep them coming if you want. We've got another 8+ minutes if there are other questions. I guess one thing that I want to do before we wrap this up, let me throw a poll up. I just wanted to see if this was helpful. And I guess the way that I put that was, should we do another event like this? It's something that we could do on a more regular basis if there are questions that folks have. We want to be helpful. It's hard to be everywhere all the time with 66 counties and everything else. So very much grateful for all of you for joining this call. And, you know, we're hopeful that we can continue to do these sorts of things. You know, we're here to be a resource for you. We're not just a bunch of cannabis advocates. We really do want good policy. I think even in some of the ordinances that have been super restrictive that I publicly haven't been a fan of, you know, we ultimately want the same things. The folks that are writing those want to keep this away from kids. They want to protect against the black market. They don't want cartel involvement, like all of this stuff. We very much want the same thing. I think we have a little bit different perspectives on how to get there, but we're, you know, grateful to be having this conversation, and better late than never as we're just starting to roll out licensing. Sioux Falls has got their lottery tomorrow. I know that Rapids is, I think, end of the year. Is that right, Kit?
Yep.
Yeah, and many places in between and north and south of there that are moving right along. Yankton did theirs a long time ago, so here we go.
Right, dovetail off you.
Yeah. Well, cool. Results of the poll. I'm going to close it down in, let's call it 10 seconds. So get your votes in if you want. Should we do another event like this? Yes or no? 5 seconds. All right, we're ending it. 51 votes. Looks like we should do another event like this. So we may not have answered all of the questions that were put into that form. I just tried to cover the most critical and frequently asked ones for you all. So what we'll do, give me a little bit of time. I will tailor this presentation a little bit more, the deck, and send it to all the attendees. Include some contact information from us all so we can be helpful to you. And then we'll work on nailing down the time to do another one of these. And, you know, we had almost 100 attendees at the high point of the call here. So that was pretty cool. And, you know, next time I wanted to do a webinar format, but we might be able to do a Zoom meeting and have a live conversation about some of this stuff. I think it's helpful and it's open to the public. It should be a good deal. More questions. What is the lead time between presentations? Oh, that was from Kit. What do you mean?
I was gonna say maybe do another poll and see, do you want it to be a monthly deal, a quarterly?
Oh, yeah.
What would be best for everybody on the deal? And I can answer.
Yep.
Yeah, so I represent.
Yeah, I'm going to add that poll question.
Yep. So I represent Dakota Cannabis Consulting. I got to tell a little bit about my background. I see Pauline's note, so I got to say a little bit of something. So when we went and started Dakota Cannabis Consulting, we wanted to come back in, and I wanted to have an opportunity to move back to South Dakota and educate everybody on what cannabis policy was and what my experiences have been in the 8 states that I've been a part of. When the licensing process had been started, you know, it had been an inkling that we wanted to get our own license and do that sort of thing. But really what we would hope for was more of an Oklahoma approach. And Oklahoma has a true free market system where everybody has the opportunity to get a license. It's $2,500. And yes, there is saturation, but within that, there's 8% market fall off in the state. That would allow me to help as many people as I possibly could, broad brushstrokes, and help them get licensed, help them get a business started, and hopefully make it work for them in the way that they chose to want to do that. Now, when municipalities and counties started capping the amount of licenses that were available, the problem with consulting on the licensing aspect is that if there's a finite amount of license, there's a finite amount of consulting. And so what Dakota Cannabis Consulting did was we took a wide variety of our clients and we basically banded together, and I'm sorry, my dogs are barking, but we took all of our clients, we banded together as like a united front. And so we have 35 members within what we have called and dubbed SCI Holdings, which is Small Cannabis Investors. And there's a wide range of people from all across the state. And so what we had to do with that was we view us as the goal line defense, the New England Patriots 2015 goal line defense, because if you don't think that big business is going to move into South Dakota and start taking up these licenses, it's absolutely going to happen. And that money isn't going to be going back to a specific South Dakota resident, right? That money is going to get exported to California and Colorado and Canada, all places that have had this cannabis operation up and running for a long time that have the wherewithal to do that, where South Dakota, we're new and we're virgin to this industry. And so that's what Dakota Cannabis Consulting has kind of formed into. Now, we're still going to use that as an education leg. And I'm still an advocate for unlimited licenses, although we are going for licenses on our own. But at the same time, it's my firm belief that everybody deserves a chance. If you can meet all the bureaucracy that is set forward within cannabis licensing and the cannabis regulatory framework, you deserve the chance at having a shot at a business. It's just like every other business in the country, and everyone earns that right when you become an American citizen. So that's my piece and that's my background. I felt like I should say that. So thanks.
All right, we've got some other ideas. I'll throw up this other poll just to see cadence or timeline wise. Cool. Looks like votes are coming in.
While the votes are coming in, Pauline, it looks like you kind of wanted to know about what everybody was doing. I just mentioned that my background with this, I actually started working with Melissa, a New Approach South Dakota, during the first petitioning cycle. I'm a qualifying patient. I am a consultant for 605 Cannabis, but I also sit on the Medical Cannabis Oversight Committee along with Melissa as a patient. So involved on several different levels of this. And for me, the focus has always been making sure that patients have safe access to therapeutics that they need.
Yeah. And I also the co-founder of 605 Cannabis, and I've had a number of folks reach out to me, probably not surprisingly, about getting into the business and talking about partnerships and that sort of thing. So we probably will be getting into the business at some point, although my main role here is just to run the association and ideally get the industry up and running and launched. So that's it. Let's see. More meetings earlier because the learning curve for local officials is very steep. All right, I agree with that. I'm going to shut down this poll and share the results, and then 3 o'clock I can let everyone go. So monthly was the response on that. I will get together with our team and see what we can do to schedule one. December is always really kind of a challenge to schedule stuff. But depending on where things are there, we could probably get one nailed out before the holidays. It's going to be helpful to you all. So yeah, I'll send an email to all of the attendees, and really, again, can't thank you enough. I want to thank Yvonne again. I want to thank Chris again. I want to thank each and every one of you for joining this. And really, the people of South Dakota are great. And, you know, I was born and raised here. Nothing's really changed, but as we've gone throughout this process, it's just been a lot of fun to make the calls and talk to some of these cities and counties throughout the state as they work to implement this new law. So with that, I think I can let everyone go. Matt, did you have anything? You raised your hand. Anyone have anything else?
Yeah, I just wanted to really quick talk to Betty's last comment about there being some confusion. Yeah, and as the five of us know, this is kind of why we pushed this kind of a meeting style or an availability style. Know from any of you guys, know that we are available to answer questions. We would love to prevent confusion. It's not, I'm not picking on them, but the most recent example of that I have would be Harrisburg having the misunderstanding that testing facilities were part of manufacturing labs. Testing laboratories have absolutely nothing to do with manufacturing labs. We are independent actually from all three of the rest of the legs of the stool. We're kind of the, for lack of a better term, we're kind of the enforcement arm of the industry. We're the ones that are giving out the COAs. The rest of them both hate us and love us at the same time. So they'll add their comments, I'm sure, to that. But yeah, Betty, we definitely want to prevent as much confusion as we can. So we are definitely available, make ourselves available for that.
And I just wanted to add one last thing too, that in the chat, I did drop our email address, comms@ciasd.com. Please feel free to utilize that. Send us any questions. If you need to get in touch with the association, that's a good way of doing it.
Look forward to working with you all, continuing to work with you all, and on to the next one. So thank you all for joining us. Have a good evening, and we'll talk to you next month.
Thank you.